I have
Oh,
to give you. I have to give you just real quick
oh,
some props
yes.
on your SAT words. You got some $5 words, dude. You've already said zeitgeist, gradation, and reductive.
That's
You're doing real.
that's why I scored
You're
a
cru-
22 on the SAT. I think is what I got. So I think I got the same
that's the
score that you.
ACT.
I got the same score you get for just putting your name on the test. So I'm glad that
Excellent.
it's working out.
You're crushing vocabulary tonight. I just want to point that out.
I appreciate that. I can't spell any of them, but I can say them.
Welcome to Guys Fishing Weekly. We don't just fish, we hook.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, dude, what's
How are
going
you?
on?
You know, chilling, getting through.
Just cranking through the last months.
Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard to get motivated. Oh, yeah, dude. Nobody told me it was going to be like this.
And I'm sure the warm weather isn't helping either.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny. I have like a work. I got no students on Friday, and we have like a teacher work day, and I'm like, oh, cool. I have meetings till like 11, and then it's like lunch and work time on your own. So I'm like, perfect time. Cut out. Go to the river. Right. Go jump on for a few hours. It's gonna be like 32 degrees. I'm like, God, it's like the
Brutal.
one day this week that's gonna be like really cold. I'm like, dang it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Same thing here. It was like 67 today, I think was the high.
Mm-hmm.
And then just it's supposed to get 2 shitty days this weekend.
Ugh. That's so rough.
Sunday will be decent, but yeah, super obnoxious.
Yeah, I gotta look. I haven't looked much. I'm hoping Monday because we have Monday off. I'm hopefully maybe going to be able to get out. I'm in the winter doldrums, dude. I'm ready for warm weather, good fishing.
You got to start tying us some flies.
I know I got to get on that. I really do. So I got that new lens for the camera. We'll see if it works. I don't know. But yeah. So got to get out.
Yep.
The winter grind.
Yep. Same here.
You been out on your bike?
A little bit. I've been running a lot more than the bike, but
yeah,
I've been getting out on it. My neighbor's been pestering the heck out of me to go do it, which helps a lot.
Yeah,
but
good. Tell our listeners why you're running so much, Ed.
So this year, I've decided to take up an annual challenge, and every year I'll pick a new challenge, but this year I chose that I'm going to be running a marathon this year. So from never running at all to running a marathon, that's not true. From not running a lot in recent years to running a marathon will be good for me. So I think probably the longest I've ever run was back in high school when I played soccer, and I probably ran 10. You're just constantly moving and sprinting and running around. I've heard that soccer players run up to like 10 to 12 miles a game. I doubt I ran that much, but I probably ran 8 to 10 miles in a game. So that's probably the longest I've run. A marathon, as I've been training, a marathon is daunting. The farthest continuous just pace I've run is I've run an 8-mile run, and I'm running a couple half marathons here in a month or two to kind of feel it out. From 8 to 13 feels manageable, but looking at a full 26.2 is daunting right now. But just one foot in front of the other, man.
That's it. That a boy. I think it's epic that you're doing that, dude. I really do. I think it's great. I just hear the word marathon and it makes me want to cry. So, yeah, more power to you. I'll be the guy ringing the cowbell on the side as you come running past, and be there at the finish line to give you a big fat hug. How's that sound?
That's what I'm
Good.
all about. I look forward to that moment. So,
Yeah, that'll be it. Yep.
it'll be a doozy, no doubt. But I do like the idea of one big annual challenge, and it kind of
Right.
gives some meaning to the year. So, I'm excited for it. Whether it's right this second, I'm not excited for it, but I'm excited for it when it's done and I have the story in my back pocket.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. It's impressive. It's impressive, dude. Gotta say, proud of you. It's awesome.
appreciate it. So yeah, that's what's been replacing time on the bike, but we'll be doing a little bit of that too. So
Yeah, that'll be good. That's good training for you.
yeah,
Anything doing, it'll be good training for you. It's good.
heck yeah.
Even hiking to fish streams and creeks and rivers and yep.
We're not hiking to
All
fish
training.
creeks and streams anymore.
All training.
We're running to fish creeks and streams going forward. There's no more just lollygagging up the mountain.
You might need a new fishing partner.
I guess I'll put up an ad on the podcast. Anyone who wants to be a new fishing buddy, let me know.
Dude, I see these trail runners. We go hiking or whatever, and I see these trail runners just come sailing down these things. I'm like, oh my God, these people are animals.
Yeah,
golly.
for sure.
It's crazy. Yeah, they're beasts.
Yeah,
That's
no idea how their knees
here,
and legs take that, but
no, God. So, yeah, that's great.
Let's get into what we're here to talk about today, which will be one of your writing pieces. I'll let you, Luke, give it a little background and give it a little reading, and then we'll just chop it up.
Yeah, it stems from, I think, my frame of mind when I wrote this.
What's the title? Are you?
Oh, yeah. The title's called The Benefits of Being Vulnerable, Lessons from a Father and Friend. I think the context was, it stems from, and I talk about it a little bit at the end, my son I kind of overheard a conversation he had with a friend, and he was signing off with his friend. The kind of chit chat high schoolers have. He's a senior in high school. And at the end of the phone call, he told his friend, like, I love you. And I was thinking about that, like at my age of, 18 years old, I was not telling my friends, I love you. Even though I felt that way, or I did, that was not something that dudes did, in that time. So that just got me thinking about that idea of vulnerability. And so it was like that kind of moment. And I think that's when I sat down and I started to write this piece and thinking about that as a dad and in other realms. And then I started thinking about it clearly about us on Guys Fishing Weekend. So that's kind of where it came from. That's kind of the background of it.
Love it.
So, yeah.
All right, hit us with your big teacher voice.
All right, here we go. Cool. The benefits of being vulnerable, lessons from a father and friend. This word seems to be something taboo for the male species. The historical mores of our society have ingrained in us, the male, that being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. For us, strength comes in our ability to manage our emotions and be in control of them. Often, that means stuffing them down into a place we want to leave them and ignore them forever. But as any man will tell you, if they're being honest, emotions don't disappear. They remain and affect us in ways we don't understand and often aren't even aware of. I think one of the most confusing to us is the emotion of vulnerability. Vulnerability means admitting we don't know. This is the control factor that my generation has been taught we must never give up. However, being in control all the time during one's life isn't real. It's impossible. Parenting has taught me that. Watching your kids struggle through adolescence is a perfect example. So much is going on, physically and mentally. It's difficult to explain to them why things happen. Like when my daughter sobs after some boy expresses his lack of interest in her. He's a dumbass, honey. That's why he doesn't like you. When your kid cries, you feel the pain. Not the pain they're feeling, but the pain of being helpless and making them understand and see that their future will be so much more than this moment. As a dad, this is a step into understanding how to be vulnerable. I often have to admit to them, I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out. But how do we become comfortable with being vulnerable with our friends? I have those male friends in my life who challenge me. They aren't afraid to call me out on my bullshit. They listen to me when I need them to. They question me to understand. They share their experience to try and offer advice. They make me laugh when I need it. And they reciprocate the vulnerability I share with them. The guys I spend the GFW with all bring this to the table. Over time, we have navigated the rough seas of vulnerability together, and we know we can count on each other for help and aid when we don't understand or we don't know. The best part about having these guys continue to influence me is the carryover into other aspects of my life. I'm a better dad, husband, brother, son, colleague, teacher, and friend because I continue to learn how to understand vulnerability and all it encompasses. It takes time, a lot of time, to get to the point in a relationship where the comfort level feels good. Building relationships is like that. It takes effort, time, and commitment. It takes a willingness to be vulnerable, that one thing we men have been taught not to be, at least not to admit to be. But if I start to think about my life without these dudes in it, life looks pretty empty. And for a lot of men, sadly, it is. I've heard the phrase lead by example a bazillion times in my life, and although it can sound corny and cliche, it's imperative in helping someone find their way out of loneliness. Vulnerability seems to act as a gateway to developing a relationship. When I am willing to embrace it and put myself out there, the gate seems to open. If I stay closed off, well, nobody comes through. For me, my willingness to adapt to and understand vulnerability has played the most effective role in deepening my friendships. I don't want to be that old school guy who teaches my son to stuff his feelings. I want to teach him the benefits of expression and vulnerability. I recently heard the tail end of a conversation my son had with one of his best friends. Sounds good, dude. See you in a little bit. I love you. He's 17 years old and telling his friend he loves him. That is vulnerability. I never did that at his age. The compliment was a testament to the influence I strive to teach my kid, and I couldn't be more proud. As parents, we must be doing something right.
It's awesome. Great piece, man. An even better voice.
Thanks, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I think voiceovers might be your future.
You know, I thought about that in retirement. It'd be fun. I sometimes do that when I read stuff to him. I do different voices. It's hilarious. I don't have very many good accents.
You could be a Pixar animated film aficionado.
Dude.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Right? Yeah.
No, but this piece is awesome. I think it talks a lot about what we talk about in general at GFW and what we benefit from doing our own trip. So I love what you put together here.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's you know, again, it comes from, you know, when I heard my son say that, I was blown away. I was, you know, it really kind of caught me off guard, but in a good way. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just profoundly kind of, whoa, like that's impressive. To be able to have that kind of vulnerability with a friend of his that he feels comfortable doing that with. I actually asked him about it, and you know, he said, "Oh yeah, we say that all the time to each other." And you know, that reciprocity kind of, you know, deal in a relationship. He's got that with some of his friends, which at his age, like I say, at 17 years old. No, he's 18 now, but at 17, that's you know, highly impressive. Advanced, you know, emotional kind of being in touch with. So, yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I think we all kind of struggle with how do you show somebody that you care for them, especially men. I think it's hard to be vulnerable in that way. And I do think, looking back on it, sometimes it's said in a, joking manner. But in every joke, I think there is a little bit of truth in all of it. And I think for some, it
Right.
means more than others. But I think it's important, that you are able to say that and and communicate that way somehow, even if it is through a little bit of a chuckle, as most guys do whenever things get uncomfortable. So, um,
Right, right. Yeah, no, and it's so true what you said. Like, in our humor and stuff, there's a reality piece to that. You know what I mean? There's some
yeah,
truth in, yeah, we joke, but you know what I mean? Yeah. We try to
it's
hide
funny
it
because
with
it's
that,
true.
with the full on, dude. Yeah. Uh, God, it's hilarious. Which we often say on Guys Fishing Weekend.
Right.
Um, how many times have we uttered that phrase? Uh, for sure. But yeah, so it's just this, and like I say, I have two daughters and one son, and it's so much easier, it seems. Um, the emotional connect with girls just seems so much more natural. I don't know, or simpler, in a lot of ways. And then, so that connection with my son and being able to do that, I'm sure he's going to be in therapy for other things, but certainly I'm doing, we're doing something right,
Right.
for him to be able to feel comfortable doing that with his friends. And that's the kind of message that I want to give him. So yeah, that was a real dub for me. Um, that was a real like parenting life dub, you know, take advantage
Yeah.
of those when they come along.
Heck yeah. I guess kind
So
of going back to the overall definition of vulnerable. Um, what do you think vulnerability means in general, means to you, means to men, things like that?
yeah, I think certainly, for me, I think it's steeped in that idea of being able to admit, I don't know. Um, that's like the ultimate, um, you know, that's the ultimate feeling or question or whatever. I don't know. How do we figure it out? I'm willing to say, I don't know. And so that takes, bringing yourself down a peg, like, I don't know it all. And even to admit that to, you know, my kids who are a lot younger than me, I've never been through that. I've been through something maybe similar, but I don't know. We'll figure it out. That's kind of where that came from. And so I think that idea, for me at least, in so many aspects of my life, when I, getting sober, um, learning how to live life without a crutch, when we touched on that in our last podcast, and um, that's vulnerable. You have to be willing to not know and accept that, and not just accept it, own it with all that comes with it. Um, and kind of plunge through that door of, that's being vulnerable, being willing to do that. And so I think it happens with emotions, and it happens with life situations, and it happens reality and real time. And, there are times in my classroom teaching kids, and they ask me this profound question about, the literature study, or a character's, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you guys think? You know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
there's a part of me that does it often. So I think I'm probably more comfortable with it, to the point where my wife sometimes thinks I share too much with people. She criticized me for that, but yeah, I think that. But being vulnerable is that unknown place, and being willing to go in there, to go to that space. Um, for me,
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of build off that. I like that. And I've also heard from I think Brene Brown is kind of one of the leading experts on vulnerability and the study of that. And I think she kind of describes it as the capability of being, physically or emotionally wounded. And so
mm-hmm.
that's kind of that not knowing, or, putting yourself out with the understanding, like, I could be wounded, or I could be physically harmed by doing this. Kind of the whole focus of just being courageous in general. I think that kind of, when you look at it through that lens, I think the description of being vulnerable, or the zeitgeist of vulnerability in society kind of today, is a little bit maybe mishyped, because I do think men are courageous and definitely put themselves out there in physical ways to be wounded. But on the emotional side, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a little different. And so, but I think when you look at it through the lens of like, am I capable of being courageous enough to be physically or emotionally wounded, was it kind of a cool, unique lens that I recently kind of came across.
Yeah, and that makes, you know, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I think that there's, you know, especially for men, with that emotional side. It's almost like with the physical capability, the higher the ramp you jump your bike off of, the higher the risk of getting wounded. But that wound was a scar. That was like, yeah, that was like you're earning your wings of into manhood. But there wasn't much play for us to do that with emotions, right? But that those
Right.
emotional scars, because we've all gone through relationships or things that hurt, that were painful. But we didn't wear those emotional scars the same way that we show off. Like, I'm reminded of the scene from Jaws when they're in there and they're like, oh, this was a thresher shark, and they're like sharing their scars from
Yeah,
shark
right.
bites. And so men did that with the physical side of that. But with the emotional side, there was more backlash into what does that stigmatize you as, right?
Right.
If you're in touch with your emotions, or you're willing to share your emotions and be vulnerable and put yourself out there, the fear of being ridiculed for that, I think was definitely, that was something that was
It's,
real.
it's almost like physical vulnerability was an advancing social tactic for men, and an emotional vulnerability was a detracting or a step back kind of
Yep.
step in the whole social process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to climb up and jump into the lake. Okay, cool. I'm going to climb up higher than you to jump in the lake, right? And then it becomes this competition of the physical aspect of it, right? Yeah, full on, dude.
And then
100%.
Billy cries when he climbs up the tree, and then everybody makes fun of him, and he never comes out
Right,
to play again.
right. Exactly. And Billy has no way to talk about that emotional scar either, right? Because, except to his mom. With dad would just be like, oh, put some dirt on it, which,
Right.
I've said at a ball game to my daughter. We're all guilty of it, as much as I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, those things are such the wrong messages. I have failed and been like, oh, she'll be all right.
Well, I mean, I think there's obviously a trade-off to both. There's two different things that you're teaching in that situation, and there is the perseverance side of like getting through something that hurts or that is painful in life, as well as the vulnerable, just the actual like staying in touch with your emotions is okay. Like you're squashing that in favor of the other, but you just have to be able to balance them both ways.
Right. Yeah, and I think too, there's got to be, um, there's got to be the space to be able to talk about, hey, I know that was really hard for you to get through that. I know that was painful. How did you deal with it? How did you get, what were you thinking about, when you got through it? And so I think that almost, that decompression piece of being able to talk about it after the fact, that helps with kids being able to put themselves out there more, and be vulnerable emotionally after the fact too. And I think, we've always tried to be, and I say we, my wife and I, with all of our kids around that kind of processing, after the fact of something that maybe they failed or didn't go well. I have just as many conversations, with my kids about whether it's, a rough go on an assignment in class or a test or a sporting event or, a relationship, constantly talking about, hey, what's next? How did you feel about that? And we kind of talk about those things, right? And having that space to do that. And I think that probably helps with them being able to be more vulnerable and put themselves out there, because it's okay if I'm not perfect, if I don't get it right. Right. And so I think there's a lot of people who that's the fear that drives them away from being vulnerable. Right. If I put myself out there, people are going to make fun of me. People are going to judge me. People are going to do those things. And it's going to come back at me. So I'm not going to do it. Right. And so it's much easier to do that. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with a couple of my 8th graders. And I was talking about, like, you get to be my age. I don't care what people think anymore. It doesn't bother me. I'm not for everyone. I get that. And it's okay with me. This is who I am, and I'll be vulnerable with people and they'll either accept that or not. And for 8th graders, one of them even said, God, I can't wait till I get to that point. It's such a real thing for them to be worried about those things and to hide that and not be vulnerable, right? And all of the things they miss out on in friendships and relationships when you're not vulnerable, right? Because as I talk about in there, that kind of gateway idea, if I'm not vulnerable and willing to put myself out there, what am I missing out on, right? I'd miss out on all these great friendships and the depth of these relationships that I have, so that's a real piece for a lot of people, especially youngsters.
For sure. I think there's also something that kind of gets lost in the discussion, because I think obviously vulnerability is a kind of a big hot topic right now, but especially for men and women pushing men to be more vulnerable. And I think in some ways we overthink, or we kind of go to the extreme on, like, okay, well, like, I have to be maximum vulnerable in every situation to make relationships. And I think there's a gradation of it that takes time to learn. The relationship has to progress to a certain point before you can really take the step of vulnerability. Like, it wouldn't make sense to go to a networking event and the first guy you see, like, hey man, great to see you. Hey, I have a porn addiction, and does that mean that we're gonna be friends now that I've told you that? I think, like, at some, there is a gradation of, like, putting yourself out over time. It's not just like straight to the point of disclosing all of your secrets. Those things take time. The relationship has to build and be in a certain position where you can actually be vulnerable to maybe the definition sense of being vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. And I even kind of talk about that. Like, it takes time to get to a place where we're at, right? I mean, we've doing this trip for 27, 28 years now. And yeah, we're incredibly comfortable and can share whatever. And I just laugh at your, walk into a mixer at work and you're like, hey, dude, yeah. Or, you run away from those dudes who have no boundaries whatsoever, right?
Right.
So there's definitely, like, I don't know you, right? So there's for sure that idea of okay, yeah, it takes a long time to get to certain levels of it.
And I think that makes some of the conversation around it hard and murky. Just hard for guys to, like, really figure out, okay, when can I be vulnerable? Like, so many unwritten rules. It's like playing baseball. Like, you just, you can't do certain things because that's the way it is. And you don't know that that's the way it is in certain circles or certain cultures or certain types of people. Like,
right. Like you don't drop a bunt when a guy's throwing a no-hitter.
Right.
Some people
Right.
firmly believe that's one of the unwritten rules, right? Yeah.
Right.
I'm
So
like,
it's just
field the bunt, dude.
play the game.
Defend.
Uh,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
but so I think that makes it hard. And then I think people, and a lot of, as the conversation around these things in general happen out in the ecosystem and social media and all of that, it's always re- reductive in its sense of like you got to be 100% vulnerable or no vulnerability, um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it does make it very challenging. And I especially when you have no practice at it and you're taught all through school really and all of your other social situations, like maybe you have that one close friend that you've had your whole life and you always feel like you can disclose something to him, but like you move once and all of a sudden you don't have that friend anymore and now you're looking for somebody who you can talk to, and you just decide, no, I'm just going to cram it down and I'll deal with it later or whatever. I think it just gets hard for people with no practice going all the way through school like that and all the way through the early life. And then, how do I turn on the vulnerability faucet out of the blue?
Right. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I thought of. One that you brought up is like that idea of all invulnerability versus none, right? Extremism and in I often think about it. I'm like, extremism in any way is dangerous, right? That runs the risk of so much. And so finding that balance, right? And then I, it the idea that it takes time and it takes authenticity, right, to get to that place with somebody, right? I can't just go out and meet the guy that I'm going to talk to, right? There's some authentic paths and things that have to go along with that, right? So there's an authenticity piece that happens, with relationships and developing them and all that kind of stuff. You can't force those things, and so yeah, um, I feel for it's, and I think that's part of the reason in writing it is addressing that idea, because I know there's people, I see kids all the time with it, with that loneliness, and how do they get places or welcoming spaces to be able to hang out, right, and just be, and so I think having places in spaces like that are important, right? To be able to authentically kind of help people get going in that direction.
100%. I think
You
that's
know,
why we talk, we lean so heavily on the idea of third spaces and being able to have a place that you can come and talk and build those things. I think also one of the true beauties of a guy's fishing weekend, for example, is the sense of adventure and the hardships, in air quotes, a fishing trip, while it's not the hardest of hard, but there are situations where just doing those adventures and activities together do break down walls much faster than going out to a hockey game, or there's just something else about doing something strenuous or adventurous that breaks down those barriers. And I think that's one of the true benefits of like a guy's fishing weekend is finding those activities that can break down those barriers.
absolutely. And through um, uncomfortableness, right? Pushing yourself, like you running a marathon, right? It's uncomfortable, um, but there's reward. There's something at the end, probably, right? I hope
Maybe. Yeah, we hope.
that's gonna feel great when you're
Right.
finally
Right.
done.
If
Right,
nothing else, I'll get a
when you
piece of
cross that.
metal.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, you get the reward of a pendant around your neck. Yeah, an oversized giant pendant. But that's kind of the idea, right? You push through those uncomfortable spots. Adventurous. There is a sense of adventure with what you're doing and what we do on Guys Fishing Weekend, and so being able to help some people do that and experience that, I think, is we've talked a lot about it and what we want to do, and have that third space, and help people create those, do what we can to help them, and guide them, and do that. That's huge, dude.
Yep.
I think that's
It's
a
like
big piece
it's
of
like
it.
in the movies. It's like in the movies when there's some hard character in a movie that you can't crack him, and then there's some precarious life-ending situation, and he opens up about his, he does this all for his dying mom who has cancer or something like that, and the emotions all come out. But it's after that tough hardship that kind of the connection can actually happen.
Right. Yeah. We've seen it, we've lived through that,
Yep.
and have been dedicated to doing just that with each other. So it's cool.
So where
I have
you
to,
mentioned,
I have to give you just real quick, some props
yes.
on your SAT words. You got some $5 words there. You've already said zeitgeist, gradation, and reductive. You're doing real.
That's why I scored a 22 on the SAT, I think is what I got. So I think I got the same score that you
ACT.
I got the same score you get for just putting your name on the test. So I'm glad that it's working out.
You're crushing vocabulary tonight. I just want to point that out.
I appreciate that. I can't spell any of them, but I can say them.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
good. You mentioned like guys are really kind of good, or maybe you didn't say good, but guys cram down their emotions, but they don't really go anywhere. Where do you kind of think they go? Where what sort of happens with those emotions?
I think that's first of all, I kind of grew up. My dad was a therapist, so he's I'd wake up in the morning and come to the breakfast table and be like, "Man, I had a crazy dream last night." My dad'd be like, "Really? Let's talk about that." Right? So I think that I've always been encouraged, in my growing up to express anger, frustration, those kinds of things. And so I never had a volatility about me, that I think sometimes comes as a result of stuffing feelings, right? And not having a way to let them out. I think a lot of guys especially, do that. They stuff things down, because you're supposed to be in control of your emotions, and then it's almost like this giant explosion. So I think there's a lot of collateral damage that can happen from something like that, in terms of emotional scars on kids, on those that are around them, that love them, that or whatever. So those kinds of things can be so crucial to maybe longevity of somebody having mental wellness issues, or those kind, having problems managing emotion. And that can, manifest itself in so many different ways, as we know. But so I think ultimately that's the thing that I think a lot of dudes maybe don't have. If you're lonely and depressed and you're stuck in those spots, maybe you don't have the know-how or the skills or the ways to get out of that, and a lot of that I think has to do with suppressed emotion. So
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think for me, like, I didn't grow up in a household that had a therapist as a dad, and the first question I came down to breakfast every day was not what was your dream about? But I do think, like, I grew up in a way that and I still do. I mean, I think probably one of the biggest things I still personally need to work on is learning to identify emotions. And there is this like loss of skill, I guess, around identifying certain emotions. And when you lose that, it's almost like sometimes you don't feel certain emotions in a way. And so I do think it is like it's a skill that you have to hone and kind of dig into, of like what is happiness, what is sad, what is anger. And I think a lot of that does bring, what you were saying about just like being depressed and things like that, is just almost the lack of ability to identify those emotions in the first place. And that's kind of what gives you this blase feel, because you're not feeling anything because you can't identify them. So uh, it's
Right.
kind of interesting. Like, that's kind of where my question was leading towards, of like, where do they go? I just don't know if they go anywhere. I think at some point you cram them down so much that you just, there's nothing, they just kind of roll off your back like water in a way.
Right. You're almost like desensitized to any emotion. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I absolutely 100% agree with that. And I think, you see it occurring. I feel like I see it occurring more and more and more, which, and maybe that's because of, social media and all of the negativity around, judgment in the way that people post and the things they say, and people can hide behind. So more people are saying, you know, mean things, whatever. And again, I see it a lot more with the kids I teach, and it's real for them, right? That thing, and I think a lot of them become desensitized to, and a lot of them turn to humor, and the way that they talk to each other is nasty in its tone, because I think they've lost that ability to identify, right, exactly what you were talking about. That's a mean thing to say, whether you're joking or not, right?
Right.
And so I think tone also has a lot to do with that process with these young kids. They don't understand that either. And so, but yeah, I don't, the emotions certainly don't go away when we stuff them. We stuff enough of them away until we don't feel anything, right?
Right.
So,
It's, a tricky one. It's there's survival mechanisms for a reason, but at the same time, like, you do need to unbox that box sometimes. Um,
and that's, and that's maybe where the vulnerability piece comes in too, right? Is being able to say, I know I can get to that space where I'm not working at identifying my emotions, and they come out in other ways, right? I'm grumpy around my kids, or I'm doing this because I'm not dealing with what I'm really feeling. And so that's the way it comes out. And so being able to be vulnerable enough to go, I'm not doing this right. Okay. Personally,
right.
I need to work on something. There's some vulnerability that it takes to do that. And there are times when I'm like, I can't figure this out. I need help. Right. Wife or friend, or, tell me, help me here. Right.
Right.
And so that vulnerability piece takes, right. And that's where it maybe comes into play even more importantly.
100%. How long do you think it takes to build kind of the vulnerability comfort zone with a friend?
I think that's a variable that I don't know that that's measurable.
Yeah.
I look at, I look at myself, and I'm willing. I talk to a lot of people. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like I'll start hamming it up or yakking it up with whoever. I'm the
Right.
dude that's like, and or I'll crack the joke in front of people. We're standing in line or whatever, and I'll try to be the funny guy, whatever, to get a laugh. So I think that there's a level of interaction that you're comfortable with, right? And people, I think, aren't at that level. I'm far more extrovert, in my personality style is just that way. And I think there's kids that it would take, I've had, and I keep saying kids because I'm thinking about my classroom, and I'm
Right.
thinking about the kids who come into my room when I first meet them on day one. I got some kids who won't shut up, and they're telling me everything about themselves. And I got other students who it takes me a semester to really crack that bubble and get that relationship, right, where they'll talk to me or they'll open up and they'll participate in class. So I think that there's those variables. It totally depends. I'm not sure that's a measurable variable. if that makes sense. I didn't really answer your question
No,
specifically, but
I think we're on the opposite side of the introvert extrovert coin. I'm on the introvert
right.
side, you're on the extrovert side. I think, knowing what I know about that, that doesn't necessarily pertain to your outgoingness, but it I think it does lend a little bit towards kind of, there's a line drawn in the sand in social conversation and social just interaction with one another where you're kind of pushing up against, and every time you see somebody, that line gets kind of drawn a little bit further away in the sand. I would tend to believe that you're more comfortable being on the further side of that line, pushing the vulnerability, whereas I might be more on the closer side of that, being a little bit more reserved, not wanting to push vulnerability too fast, even though my insides probably scream like, we got to get past this line. I'm not the one that's like comfortable pushing it past that line. And I think, so in some ways, like, your approach probably lends to more success on getting to those vulnerable zones quicker, in the sense that you're comfortable pushing the envelope a little bit, whereas it'll take me longer because I kind of just don't push it, or don't, and I stay in the friend zone. I stay in the zone a little bit longer, right?
Rather than get to the end zone. Yeah.
That's right. So
no, I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. I think that's dead on. And that's, that's why that I think that it just depends on those variables. And then when you can get somebody maybe who's introverted like you, who befriends, somebody who's extroverted like me, that process might speed up unless, like, instead of you meeting somebody who's introverted like you, it might take a lot longer, right?
Right.
That concept, I think, is dead on.
Well, I guess what actionable takeaway would you want people to have, kind of reading this piece or listening to this conversation?
I think the biggest thing is the idea, the concept of risk and reward, right? If vulnerability, there's a risk involved in that. And I think that, for me, I've found through my experiences that I've gone through in my life, at the different times of my life. I went to college a long way away from where I grew up. That was a risk. That was a vulnerable move. I managed my way through. I worked getting jobs, all that kind of stuff through college. I got sober. That was a risk. That was a vulnerable thing, right? Not knowing what's on the other side of that. So when I think about all of those risks that I've done through my life, vulnerability played a role in that. And, the big ones were incredibly rewarding. And so there's a risk reward factor that plays into vulnerability. And I think when you are authentically able to risk certain things, and put yourself out there and be uncomfortable, that helps you grow. No matter what, whether it fails, whether, you're not rewarded, you still learn through that process. And I think for me, in vulnerability, that's kind of the idea, right? We risk, we continue to grow and become better at life, at whatever it is.
Right.
And I think that's what, I talked a little bit about how it bleeds into other things all the time, all the different hats we wear in our lives and relationships in things. And I think that vulnerability plays a huge role in growth. And if you're willing to do that, the rewards are, they're immeasurable because they're so great. So
I love that.
That's, I think, the ultimate message. Yeah.
I love
Thanks,
that.
dude.
This was a fun one. I appreciate the vulnerability, some would say.
Yeah. It was good. It was good. Well, hopefully it'll resonate with some people.
Yeah,
Pick
for
up
sure.
something. Great. Right on,
Again.
dude.
All right, man. Well, until the next one, I love you.
Absolutely. I love you, bro. Talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Bye.